Micronutrient deficiencies. I think last class sir taught you about iron deficiency anemia, right? So that was the deficiency of a micronutrient called iron. That is very important, especially as a public health problem. So there are many micronutrients, as you know, but we will not be studying all in detail in this lecture class. We will only be focusing on those which pose a public health problem to India. Okay. So one was iron. The major micronutrient that causes deficiency was iron. But there are some other micronutrients as well, which are a public health problem, and they have their own program to tackle that public health problem. So they are vitamin A, iodine, and some other micronutrients. So as you know, vitamin A is retinol, right? Retinol is vitamin A. So for the vitamin, there is a provitamin, the compound from which vitamin is formed. So for that, that is the beta carotene. Okay, there are some other carotene formations that are there in the body, but from this beta carotene only, the vitamin A or the retinol is formed. Okay. So what are some vitamin A rich food? You may ask. So there is among the animal food, there are the cheese, animal based food, cheese, eggs, milk, yogurt, and liver based food, that is meat, liver. Okay. There is the oily fish having oil, that is having more omega 3 fatty acid. So what happens is that because this vitamin is a fat soluble vitamin, right? So that is why the best source of this vitamin A is the oily fish. Other than that, the animal foods are cheese, eggs, milk, yogurt, liver-based foods, and the plant-based are vegetables like carrot, papaya, mango, that is colored foods, okay, like red or yellow, xanthine that has, and beta carotene, and then sweet potato, apricots, and there is the GLVs also, the green leafy vegetables. So, whenever you are asked what are some vitamin A rich foods, you divide it into first two animal based foods and plant based foods. Okay, animal based foods are this cheese, eggs, milk, yogurt, okay, liver, and then oily fish. And among the plant based foods, the vegetables there are also GLVs also, green leafy vegetables, and also like yellow colored or orange colored foods mainly like carrot, papaya, okay, mango, apricot, sweet potato, etc. It is like that. So sweet potato, it is tuber, but in any case, so these are the vitamin A rich food. Because this food is consumed by a much lower population in this country, because maximum of the population, they cannot afford so many variety of food, so that is why the vitamin A deficiency is a public health problem, and these are found mainly in these types of foods and not in very common foods like cereals and all. They are not rich in vitamin A. So what are the facts on vitamin A? First of all, if someone asks you the how much vitamin A is there, so 1 microgram of beta carotene is 0.167 retinol equivalent, and 1 retinol equivalent is 3.3 international units of vitamin A. So vitamin A is measured in international units and it can be converted to retinol equivalent. Retinol equivalent is basically a unit from which you can convert other forms of the carotene into vitamin A if you want to calculate the quantity. So that is why this calculation is there. So 1 retinol equivalent is 3.33 international units of vitamin A. Now what are the uses of vitamin A? It is useful for maintaining normal vision. Okay? It is useful for maintaining normal vision, that is function of the eye. Then maintaining the integrity and normal functioning of the epithelial tissue. Okay, glandular and epithelial tissue. So the epithelial tissue health is very much maintained by the vitamin A. It also supports skeletal growth. It supports the anti-infective property, the body boosts immune response. Okay, so the immunity is also boosted by vitamin A, and it is protective against some epithelial cancer like bronchial cancer. Okay, so these are the main uses. Normal vision, maintaining glandular epithelial tissue function, right? Then skeletal growth is supported, immune response is supported, and it prevents some forms of epithelial cancer. Okay. Now, what are the ocular manifestations of vitamin A deficiency? What are the ocular manifestations of vitamin A? Now, if you are asked what are the diseases caused by vitamin A deficiency, you will tell like there are two main forms, ocular manifestations and extraocular manifestations. So, what are the ocular manifestations? It is basically xerophthalmia. The first term that you say is xerophthalmia. Xerophthalmia consists of many steps. How xerophthalmia is formed? This whole spectrum of disease is called xerophthalmia. So it starts with this night blindness. Okay? Night blindness that is the rod cells, they are not functioning properly. During the night, the rod cells that are helping you in perceiving the black and white vision, it is not functioning well. Okay? And the cone cells are also not functioning well. So that is why at night you are not able to see properly. That is night blindness. Then it starts with conjunctival xerosis. So it starts then from the conjunctiva. Since vitamin A is responsible for epithelial tissue maintenance. So if the epithelial tissue is stopped maintaining, what happens is this mucosal layer starts drying. The epithelial layer starts drying. It stops forming, and that is why it starts drying. So xerosis means drying. It starts drying. So conjunctiva starts drying. It will become lusterless. It will become dry, dull, etc. So to start with the conjunctiva, then Bitot spot will form. This is called a Bitot spot. There are some whitish pigmented spots that are formed around the cornea, on either side of the cornea. Okay. So this is the Bitot spots. Then comes the corneal xerosis. Means now the cornea starts drying. Then after drying there is ulceration. There can, if it is less than 1/3 corneal surface, it is X3A, more than 1/3 corneal surface, X3B. So corneal ulceration, if it's formed, it is called keratomalacia. Keratomalacia. Then there is corneal scar formation, and finally this whole eye becomes xerophthalmic fundus. So this is totally a dry eye, xerophthalmic eye. Okay, because it is totally dried. Cornea and conjunctiva, etc. So these are the ocular manifestations of vitamin A. Okay. So what are some extraocular manifestations of vitamin A? Again, if the epithelial tissue health is not maintained, there can be follicular hyperkeratosis, there can be anorexia, okay, gastrointestinal respiratory problems, infections can be there, and there is growth retardation due to skeletal maintenance problems. So if the skeletal growth is stopped supported by the vitamin A deficiency, then skeletal growth can be affected, and there can be growth retardation as well. Okay. So follicular hyperkeratosis, anorexia, skeletal growth retardation, and respiratory and gastrointestinal infection chances are increased in vitamin A deficiency. Now what are the treatment and prevention methods? Okay. The treatment and prevention methods are, first of all, treatment. If a child is having this vitamin A deficiency, you will find that a little bit later in life. Okay. So you administer 2 lakh international units of vitamin A on 2 consecutive days. It is written as such in PARC. Usually you can range from 1 to 3 days depending on the age of the child and the dosage. But for treatment purposes in the PHC level and such, for maintenance of the uniformity of treatment, it is said that 2 lakh international units orally by the syrup form for 2 to 3 days. What is the prevention? Now, because it's a public health problem, there is a preventive aspect or a preventive program for vitamin A deficiency controlling. So, what is the prevention? First of all, improvement in diet. Diet improvement. As you saw, the diet, the food sources that are there for vitamin A, that has to be maintained and improved. So, vitamin A rich food, also vitamin A fortified food. Because people are mainly saying that okay, we are taking rice, wheat, oil. So, those things are used more in India, consumed by more people in India. So, you put vitamin A in them, fortify those food with vitamin A, so that the vitamin A is there reached in the body. So in the oil, in the ghee, vitamin A is put or fortified. We learned that in the last class, that vitamin A is put in the food and fortification is done so that it reaches to the masses. That is one way of controlling the vitamin A deficiency through diet. Okay? Then reducing the frequency and severity of risk factors. If you prevent the occurrence of the infectious diseases more, then vitamin A deficiency can be prevented. Like PEM, that is protein energy malnutrition, diarrhea, respiratory infection, measles, that is also measles also affects the epithelial tissue. So what happens? It is not like vitamin A deficiency is causing these diseases per se. If there is these diseases occurring repeatedly, vitamin A is becomes deficient in the body, the vitamin A level is lowering, and that in turn is again causing the problem in integrity of the epithelial tissue as well. So it is like a vicious cycle. Infection and malnutrition cycle is a vicious cycle. From infection results malnutrition, from malnutrition results infection, and such the cycle goes on. So that is why for tackling any type of micronutrient or macronutrient deficiency, even for any nutrition deficiency, one preventive aspect is always treatment and prevention of infections. Okay? And here in vitamin A deficiency, it is the prevention of infection that affects the epithelial tissue. So there is PEM, there is diarrhea, there is measles, there is respiratory infections. So if you prevent and treat these diseases properly, then vitamin A level is maintained. Consequently, if these diseases occur, the child, especially an under 5 child, is given vitamin A supplementation. Okay, they are given vitamin A supplementation if these diseases occur, so that when the vitamin A deficiency is occurring due to those diseases, then the vitamin A is nourished back into the body so that the infection doesn't occur again or the epithelial lining improves. Understood? Then next is the administration of vitamin A under NIS from 6 months till 5 years of age to prevent xerophthalmia. Now, what is this vitamin A preventive from 6 months till 5 years, and what is NIS? Any idea what is NIS? National Immunization Schedule. NIS is National Immunization Schedule. It starts from birth. Mainly it is for the under 5 children, but it goes on till adolescence as well, and there is for pregnant and mothers as well. The NIS covers all those aspects, the vaccines that are given. Now, apart from the vaccines, because vitamin A deficiency is such a public health problem, especially for children, that is why this vitamin A is introduced under NIS as well. Okay? So, it starts from 6 months. At 6 months, what dose is given? What dose of vitamin A is given at 6 months? 1 lakh international units. Remember, at 6 months, when the child is coming to the center to get the vaccine, apart from the vaccine they get at 6 months, right? What? 6 months or 9 months? It can be given from 6 months, but the child usually comes to get vaccines at 9 months, to get the measles, to get the JE vaccine, right? So that is why because child will not come every time repeatedly to the center to get one vaccine, they will not come like that. they will come to get scheduled 2-3 vaccines together. So that is why when the child is called, because the measles vaccine is given, JE vaccine is given at 9 months, so that's why the vitamin A is also given first time at 9 months. So at 9 months what happens is, the child is coming, you are giving them measles and JE vaccine, and with that 1 lakh international units of vitamin A. Okay. Then the child will come every 6 months to get the vitamin A dose, and from the second dose there is 2 lakh international units. Okay. So from the 9 months, every 6 months, if they come, they will coming total 9 times till 5 years of age, till the child turns 5 years. Then there will be 9 doses of vitamin A. The first dose is the 1 lakh international units, and the subsequent doses are 2 lakh international units. They are given by this spoon. This vitamin A spoon is there along with the syrup, that is has a groove in it. The inner groove represents the 1 lakh international unit mark or the 1 ml mark, and the upper groove is the 2 lakh international units mark or the 2 ml mark. So by measuring with that spoon, the dose of the vitamin A is given. So the child in this NIS gets 9 doses of vitamin A. This is for prevention of vitamin A deficiency, and it in turn helps in maintaining the integrity of the lining of the epithelial tissue during any infection. Okay. But if there is a problem with deficiency, excess administration of it can cause problems as well. That is why vitamins should be taken in moderate and very measured amounts and not in excess. Not all the vitamins that are taken from outside, especially the multivitamins that you will take, you cannot take them indefinitely, otherwise there will be hypervitaminosis of those minerals. So excess intake can cause nausea, vomiting, anorexia, sleep disorders, skin desquamation, skin can peel off, enlarged liver, papillary edema and such. So excess intake of this vitamin A can also cause problems. So you have to carefully measure. Now the vitamin A syrup that I am talking about, they are not available in the commercial platforms. It is not available in any pharmacy. Vitamin A syrup is only available in the center, in the government or public health centers. Okay, the vitamin A, just vitamin A syrups with this spoon. It is available in the government setups only. So, clear about the treatment and the prevention of vitamin A? It is very important. I have just written one line from here, but if question comes, you have to elaborate like it is written in the book. Okay, all the points that I have mentioned, you have to write as mentioned in the book. So, these are some vitamin A deficiencies. I showed that in the last class, that vitamin A, it is causing this keratomalacia, D deficiency is causing rickets and osteomalacia, tocopherol, mild hemolytic anemia, and this vitamin K is causing bleeding diathesis. Vitamin K, for every newborn, apart from the vaccines, vitamin K injection is also given in many centers to prevent the vitamin K deficiency. Okay. And then there is a water soluble vitamins that can cause all these things. I am not elaborating on the other problems of vitamin deficiencies because they are no longer a public health problem. They have been controlled by improvement in lifestyle, diet, food security, okay, etc. But the vitamin A deficiency in under 5 children especially remains a public health problem. That is why I have elaborated on that. Okay. Now minerals. Mineral deficiency, there are two main problems. Can you guess from these pictures what mineral deficiency I am talking about? Iodine, number 1. Number 2, fluorine or fluoride. So this is an iodized salt and this is the dental fluorosis. Okay, that can occur. So we will cover two main minerals that are causing public health problems, that is the iodine and the fluoride. So iodine, it is an essential micronutrient. It is an essential micronutrient usually it is taken from outside. Okay, they are not formed in our body, it is taken from outside. Then it is required for synthesis of thyroid hormones, mainly for the requirement of synthesis of thyroid hormones in our body. So what is the daily requirement? It is 150 microgram, and in pregnancy the requirement increases to 250 microgram per day. Okay. What are the best food sources? Seafood, cod liver oil, and other sources of milk, meat, vegetables, cereals, etc. So it is found in small amounts in all the food. Okay, but the best is seafood and cod liver oil. So why it is a public health problem then, this iodine? If it is available in so many food, especially in very common foods, then why it is a public health problem? Because from this food, if they are available in very minute amounts, if food is not taken in adequate quantities, iodine deficiency are occurring. Plus this very best food sources, they are not taken by all people. Okay, less than 1% of the country consume this seafood and cod liver oil. Mainly in the Himalayan foothills belt, there used to be a belt where the people used to suffer from iodine deficiency. That was also called goiter belt. Goiter belt means, what is this goiter? It results from the deficiency of thyroid hormones, right? So that is why this goiter belt in the Himalayan foothills region, they used to have this very much high public health problem of the goiter and the thyroid hormone deficiency, and mainly because they had iodine deficiency in their food. So what are the iodine deficiency disorders? Now that was one manifestation of it, that is goiter, but iodine can result in many other diseases as well. So this whole spectrum of diseases are called iodine deficiency disorders, IDD. So whenever someone is telling you what is IDD, you know that acronym, it is standing for the iodine deficiency disorders. The abbreviation is the iodine deficiency disorders, IDD. So there is a goiter. There are different grades of goiter, multinodular goiter. Then there can be just hypothyroidism, okay, deficiency of thyroid hormone. Then there is variable severity of subnormal intelligence, delayed motor speech, especially in children, delayed motor milestones, impaired mental function, hearing defects, speech defects. So these developmental delays and developmental defects can take place especially in children if there is iodine deficiency. Then myxedematous cretinism, that is dwarfism, severe mental retardation, that can also take place. So goiter and cretinism are the two important diseases that can take place due to iodine deficiency. Goiter and cretinism. Then for the ocular part, what is there? That is a strabismus, a squint can take place, nystagmus can take place. Then there can be neuromuscular weakness as well. And diplegia, quadriplegia, spasticity can occur. This is the neurological defect. Then there is endemic cretinism like hypothyroid, and neurological cretinism like deaf mutism. And finally, in the mother, if there is iodine deficiency, there is increased rate of stillbirth, miscarriage, etc. Okay. So these are all the iodine deficiency disorders that can take place due to deficiency of iodine in the diet. So we'll again see there is a goiter, hypothyroidism, developmental delays and subnormal intelligence, myxedematous cretinism, strabismus, nystagmus, neuromuscular weakness and spasticity, okay, then endemic cretinism, and increased rate of spontaneous miscarriages and stillbirth. Okay, these are the iodine deficiency disorders. So, how to tackle this iodine deficiency disorder? There is the screening part and the management part. Now, what is screening? Anyone can tell what is screening? Evaluation of something. ठीक আছে, good evaluation of something, but evaluation of something just diagnosis ও বলে ওটাকে, আমরা একটা ডিজিজ ডায়াগনোস করছি। তো স্ক্রিনিং মানে কি? What is the difference between diagnosis and screening? And screening আমরা কখন করি, diagnosis আমরা কখন করি? Very important to understand in this subject. একটা পাবলিক হেলথ প্রবলেম আছে পপুলেশনে, আমরা স্ক্রিনিং করব, ঠিক আছে? স্ক্রিনিং আর ডায়াগনোসিসের মধ্যে ডিফারেন্স কি? স্ক্রিনিং মিন্স অ্যাপারেন্টলি হেলদি পপুলেশন, যার কোনো সাইন্স অ্যান্ড সিমটমস নেই, তাদের মধ্যে যদি আমি ডিজিজ ডিটেক্ট করার চেষ্টা করি, if I want to detect the disease in apparently healthy population, okay, then that is screening. Now if a person has signs and symptoms, they are coming to you, a doctor or a health center, for checkup and for that disease, then you do the different tests to confirm the disease, okay, that is the diagnosis. But in healthy population, especially for a population from where you want to see whether a certain problem exists or not, then you have to do screening, because not all people are having the signs and symptoms. Only 1-2% people will present to you with signs and symptoms. The rest 98% are like the submerged part of the iceberg. Okay, they will not be showing their signs and symptoms. They will not be showing to the health centers for checkup. So that is why you have to go out to the population and do the screening and detect the disease, which disease is causing such problems. So that is the screening. So for screening of iodine or the epidemiological assessment of iodine, from that procedure you can detect what is the prevalence of goiter. Okay, people having goiter, even they are not also aware that they are having any problem. Okay, so you have to screen for the goiter. You can screen for cretinism. There is surveillance. Surveillance means you are continuously monitoring the level of the iodine in the population. You can do that by urinary iodine excretion. There is a constant surveillance. Then there is a measurement of TSH, T4 and T3. Prevalence of neonatal hypothyroidism. So the number of neonates that are born, if you are testing them for thyroid, then prevalence of neonatal hypothyroidism can be done. Okay, that is an indicator of environmental iodine deficiency. And finally the salt testing of iodine. That is the iodine that is present in the salt, that is the iodized salt. You are testing that in maybe a area or some households. We are seeing the level of iodine in that salt that they are consuming. Okay, ideal level is 15 parts per million at consumer level. So it should be at least 15 parts per million of iodine or above in the salt with the people they are consuming. Anything less than that means there is inadequate iron intake. It should be at least 15 ppm or more for adequate iodine intake. Okay, adequate iodine intake. So there is screening and the management. So you do the epidemiological assessment, that is prevalence of goiter, prevalence of cretinism, okay, urinary iodine excretion, then measurement of TSH, T3, T4 and prevalence of neonatal hypothyroidism and testing of the salt for iodine level. So this is the epidemiological assessment. Now there is the iodine control program, IDD control program or National IDD control program. So NIDDCP. The program's name is NIDDCP, National Iodine Deficiency Disorder Control Program. So what are the measures taken under that program to tackle this iodine deficiency disorder? You are fortifying the edible salt with iodine, supplying the iodized salt in place of the common salt. Pink salt, rock salt, all those things, they are very much deficient in iodine. They do not have iodine and they are having some harmful minerals as well. So you are replacing that with iodized salt. So fortify the edible salt with the iodine. Why salt? Now question also comes that why are we choosing salt as the medium to tackle the iodine deficiency, because it is a cost effective strategy. Okay, it saves cost on the part of the government to put iodine in salt. It does not change the color, taste or odor of the food of the salt, so it is a good additive, and it is used widespread in cooking and seasoning. Everyone uses salt. So if you just make that salt reach the households, then you can tackle the iodine deficiency. So it is around the late 90s, 2000s, this program was implemented in the late 90s, and slowly the goiter zone, that is the endemic region, the goiter was tackled. And now you rarely see goiter. The people who are just taking the salt from their local source or never had taken iodized salt, they are only presenting with the goiter, or someone having some other forms of thyroid disorders. But just from the deficiency of iodine, what happens, that goiter used to take place, that is not there anymore. So that is the NIDDCP. So this strategy has proven very effective. Okay. Then you can do surveys to assess the magnitude of IDD in districts. In the district level, you can do survey to see what is the level of IDD and what is the management, efficiency of the management of this IDD. Then assess IDD and impact of iodized salt every 5 years. Laboratory monitoring of iodized salt and urinary iodine excretion, and health education and advocacy. So all these are coming under the NIDDCP. Mainly it is focused on the distribution of the iodized salt and then continuous monitoring and surveillance. Okay. So all these points need to be there when you are asked about NIDDCP, the National Iron Deficiency Disorder Control Program. Okay, understood? Then there is something called the MBI kit. MBI is the name of the brand actually, but it is the rapid testing kit of detecting the level of iodine in the salt. So it is a test kit produced by MBI Kits International, Chennai. It is a starch-based test. It is a rapid field-based test kit for checking the iodine content in the salt. It is inexpensive. Offer a simple method of monitoring iodine by denoting the color change. So as you can see, if these reagents are given in the salt, if there is no iodine, there will be white color, less than 7 ppm low iodine, less than 15 ppm low iodine. Now if it is turning a dark, this purple color, then it is more than 15 ppm, so less than 30 ppm. So standard level of iodine. So this is the color by which the color of the salt is then compared. Okay, by comparing the color of the salt after adding the reagent. So the level should be between 15 ppm to 30 ppm. Maximum level of iodine at the manufacturer level should be 30 ppm in the salt, and it then trickles down, and at the consumer level it should be at least 15 ppm. Okay, as I said, it should not be less than that and it should not be more than 30. Otherwise, then again, more intake of iodine can cause other problems. So, why this from the 30 ppm level at the manufacturer level, it then decreases to 15 ppm at the consumer level? Why doesn't it stay the same? Any idea? Why doesn't iodine level stay the same? Because iodine is sublime. Okay. It converts directly from the solid particles to the gaseous particle. If it is kept like open, it sublimation occurs. So even if you keep the cooking salt open, iodine can evaporate from it. That is why from the manufacturer level it is decreasing, but it should not decrease to less than 15 ppm when reaching the consumer level. So that is why the packaged salt, if you buy the packed salt, that is better in maintaining the iodine than if you buy some salt kept in the open. Okay, you buy the packaged salt and then keep the salt in a closed container at home. Otherwise the salt will evaporate. Iodine will evaporate. Okay, so that is why you keep the salt in a closed container. Even while cooking, if you want to preserve the vitamins and minerals, especially the water soluble vitamins and minerals, you do the cooking, you put the salt and you cook with keeping the lid closed most of the time and not keeping it mostly open. Mostly closed, you have to keep the lid mostly closed so that you can preserve the vitamins, minerals and iodine in the food. Otherwise everything will evaporate. So that is a good cooking practice. Okay, so just by making the salt reach homes it is not enough. You have to tell them, you have to make the people aware how to use that salt in the diet. Okay, how to keep the salt in their home so that the iodine reaches their bodies. So understood about iodine. This is still now being controlled. The program is still going on. Okay, but mostly the program has been successful and tackling this iodine deficiency. Then there is fluorine. Fluorine is found mainly in the bones and teeth, and the recommended level of fluorine is 0.5 to 0.8 milligram per liter. So what is the source? Mainly it is there in the drinking water. It should be 0.5, but in some places it is 1. 1 milligram per liter is okay, tolerable. So what are the other food sources? Sea fish, cheese, tea, it is like that. In very small amounts it is there in the other food. Mainly it is there in our drinking water. The fluorine is present in our drinking water. Now it depends at how much fluorine is there in our drinking water. It should be there in 0.5 to 1 milligram per liter, because less of that fluorine will cause problems and more of that fluorine will also cause problems. So it is a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword. Double-edged sword means the deficiency can also cause problems and excess can also cause problems. Right? So what does the excess cause? Prolonged exposure to high levels of fluorine can cause dental and skeletal fluorosis. Okay, and deficiency of fluorine in the water can cause dental caries. So both the deficiency and the excess can cause diseases. Again, because this is present in the drinking water mainly, it is a public health problem. It is depending on the sources of drinking water everywhere, the local sources of drinking water. So the fluorine level is also checked periodically in the drinking water, that the level is maintained. Wherever there is a excess of fluorine in the drinking water, it is then tackled by the water sanitation department. Okay, if there is a deficiency of fluorine, it is recommended that some fluorine intake is added in the water so that the level of the fluorine is maintained. Otherwise, the dental caries can take place. Okay, so this is fluorine. Now I showed this diagram before also. There are some other minerals as well, like magnesium. It maintains the skeletal system, immune health. Then there is the sodium, potassium, iron you have studied, iodine you have studied, phosphorus, it is maintaining bone and teeth, zinc, it is maintaining the coenzymes, many coenzymes are formed from zinc and maintaining the immune system, and calcium. So all these are minerals that are maintaining our health. Okay.